At breakfast, my daughter said, "I have a surprise for you." She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a debt statement in my name for $450,000. Her husband, Max, added, "This needs to be paid by Monday." When I refused, my daughter threw a mug of hot coffee at me. Her husband just yelled, "Get the hell out." An hour later, the police arrived. This story is based on true events. Friends, tell me, what city are you from and how old are you? I'm always curious who's listening. I hope you enjoy the story. The morning had been ordinary. Light filtered through the kitchen curtains, casting familiar shadows on the linoleum floor, while I did what I always do. Drank my coffee and listened to the local NPR station. Though to be honest, I hadn't really been paying attention to it for years. October in Cleveland always brought a special kind of clarity. The air, the light, even my own thoughts seemed to become sharper. "Dad, I have a surprise for you," Lena, my daughter, said suddenly. She had that special smile she always used when she wanted something from me. I looked up. She was standing in the doorway between the hall and the kitchen, clutching a yellow envelope like she was hiding from gunfire behind it. Behind her, leaning against my kitchen counter, stood her husband, Max. He was acting like he owned the place. And this was my place, my kitchen, my morning. What kind of surprise could this be? I put down the newspaper, folding it neatly, and pushed aside my half-eaten toast. My coffee had already gone cold, but I took a sip anyway, buying time to study their faces. "Just open it, you'll see," Lena said. Her voice was a little higher than usual, and her smile seemed forced. Her hands were trembling. "All right, George, let's get on with it," Max chimed in, his voice sharp and confident. "We've been planning this for a while." I opened the envelope. The documents spilled onto the table. It was a thick, crisp stack with official-looking letterheads, signatures, and numbers. I started sorting through the pages. Credit statements, promissory notes, receipts, all in my name. The amounts were so large they made my chest tighten. What in the devil was this? "These are your debts, Dad." Lena's voice turned cold. "We found them when we were helping you get organized last month. Remember?" I remembered nothing of the sort. I remembered them coming over to help, digging through my papers while I cooked the meatballs. But I certainly didn't remember signing my name to debts worth $450,000. I've never once set foot in a casino in my life. I laid the papers out, reading the cities. Atlantic City, Las Vegas, some online betting sites based in the Caribbean. I'd never been to any of those places. My memory isn't what it used to be, sure. But this? Max stepped closer. His voice was a low press. "The signatures are a perfect match for yours." I looked closer, and it was true. Letter for letter, just like my own, as if I'd written them myself. Every check mark, every loop was exact. "These debts have to be settled by Monday," Max said, his tone now dry and businesslike. "Otherwise, we'll lose everything. The house, the car, everything." Monday. Today was Monday. Lena moved closer. Now they stood together, a united front. "We can't let that happen, Dad. We're a family. We can't be homeless." I looked at her, the daughter I had raised for 35 years, on my own, after Nina passed away. I paid for her college, for her wedding. I supported them when Max kept losing jobs, one after another. And now she was looking at me as if I were a burden. "I didn't sign these," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Someone forged my signature. And who else knows all your personal information? Who knows your date of birth? Your mother's maiden name?" Tears instantly streamed down her face, as if on command. Silence hung in the air. Max looked at me with a kind of satisfaction, then glanced away. "We have to handle this together," Lena said, placing her hand on my arm. "As a family. But first, we have to pay this off before it's too late." I pulled my hand away and stood up. The papers scattered across the table like trash, flowing over the tablecloth. "This isn't the end of it," I said, looking them both in the eye. "It absolutely is not," Lena sobbed, though it sounded fake, like something out of a bad movie. She went toward me, her arms outstretched as if to a wounded animal. "Dad, please, we're a family. Remember what you always said? Family is the most important thing. Family doesn't forge signatures. I don't run up debts of $450,000. Max moved forward, standing in the doorway, blocking my path. "These documents are legal. Your signatures are on them. It's your responsibility," he said. "My responsibility?" I chuckled. "I've never gambled in my life. Ask anyone you want." "People change." Lena wiped her nose with the back of her hand, like she did as a child. "Maybe you don't even remember? Stress, age, all that." "I'm not senile," I cut her off. Her voice, a practiced pity, grated on me. Max stepped closer. "You really think you can keep this up? The yard, the repairs, the bills?" "I was managing just fine," I replied. "And what about the insurance and tax documents? Are they in order?" Lena pulled out another sheet. "They were in your folder with the insurance policies. You wouldn't have even noticed." I fell silent. She was right. Everything was in the right folder. Too neat to be a coincidence. Someone had set this up. "We wanted to give you a chance," Max interjected. "We could have just waited for the collection agents." "Do what?" I looked at them. "I owe nothing, and I'm not paying for this." "Then why are all the signatures yours?" Lena waved a document as if she were in a courtroom. I looked. It was true. An identical signature. Every single line was a perfect copy of my own. "It's not hard to learn to forge a signature," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Max pulled a new stack of papers from somewhere. "These are all from the last 6 months. Or are you going to say someone's been following you for half a year?" Lena moved closer. The tears were gone. Her face was like steel. "We're not asking you to admit it. We're asking you to take responsibility. These debts are real. They're in your name. If you don't pay, we lose everything." I looked around my kitchen, the calendar with my handwriting, notes about doctor's appointments and grocery lists. Everything here was mine. My home. "Technically, yes," Max smirked. "But Lena has been helping out a lot lately. The taxes last year. The roof we had repaired in August. All on her dime." "Are there receipts?" I remembered. Indeed, she had offered to handle it. I was even surprised, but I figured my daughter was just being caring. "Where would we go if they take the house?" Lena's voice dropped. "We have no other options. Max has been out of work for 3 months. We live here because we have nowhere else to go." "They live here," I thought. "They visit. They'll take everything," Max added. "The house, the car, even Lena's jewelry." "So what then? We all go to a shelter." Lena sat down, covering her face with her hands. "I thought we would handle this as a family. And you?" "These aren't my debts," I repeated. But even I wasn't sure if I believed myself anymore. The signatures, everything looked too much like the truth. Max changed his tone. "We need to sort this out today, before the creditors start calling." Lena jumped up, her tears gone, her eyes cold and angry. "I've had it with this," she snapped. "We tried to do this the nice way, but you're like always, only thinking about yourself." She walked over to the coffee maker. Her movements were sharp. I took a step back. There was something dangerous about her now. I'm 35 years old. 35 years I've put up with your lectures. "Lena, calm down," I started, but it was too late. She grabbed the glass coffee pot. Steam was rising from the spout. Her hands were shaking, but she held the handle tightly. "You raised me a different way," I said quietly. "You raised me to clean up your messes," she spat. The coffee pot flew forward. I didn't have time to dodge. The hot liquid splashed across my chest, burning through my flannel shirt. The sensation was like being pressed with an iron. I gasped, stumbling back, tearing the wet cloth from my burned skin. The pain was sharp, searing. Lena stood there with the empty coffee pot, her eyes wide. But there was no horror in them, something else. Shock, realization. Max stepped forward and said evenly, "Get your things, old man. This is our house now." I stood in my kitchen, dripping with hot coffee. My shirt was clinging to my skin. The pain was making my breathing hitch, but I held myself straight. I looked at her, at the daughter I had raised, fed, taught to ride a bike. She stood there, still clutching the empty coffee pot, breathing hard. Her eyes didn't leave mine. Max took another step closer. His voice was calm, almost friendly. "Pack a bag. Take what you can carry. We'll send the rest later if we feel like it." "This is my house," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "My name is on the deed. I paid the mortgage for 30 years. "Not anymore," he shot back. "Papers change everything. Tomorrow the bailiffs will be here and Lena and I will sort it out. We have nothing to lose." I glanced at my daughter. She was silent. Her eyes were dry. No remorse, no shame. "Did you plan all of this?" I asked. "The documents, the blackmail?" Max just shrugged. "We're solving a problem. Your problem. Your problem. With my debts, my age, my incompetence. You signed it all yourself." The shirt was stinging, but the pain in my chest was worse. It felt like they were looking at me as a nuisance, something in their way. I had to get dressed, I thought. I needed to cool the burn. 5 minutes, Max said, stepping aside. "Pack light. We've got places to be." I walked to my room, feeling the pain spread across my chest with every second. I closed the door and took a deep breath. Enough. I pulled off the shirt, carefully, through the pain. Red patches from my neck to my stomach. Not blistered, but burned well enough. I went to the mirror. My reflection looked, frankly, not very festive. Gray hair, traces of coffee. But my eyes were no longer lost. They were resolute. A clean shirt cooled my skin. I pulled it on, though it was unpleasant, my body aching. I opened the closet and took out an old Samsonite from the 70s, the one with the hard sides. I tossed in 3 changes of clothes, a couple of pairs of pants, a first aid kit, my medication, and then the most important thing from my desk drawer, the main folder. They hadn't found it. It held all the documents for the house, my insurance policy, my will, my birth certificate, old statements. Everything that proved this was mine. My wallet had about $200, not much, but enough for now. My phone, keys, charger, all in my pocket. 10 minutes. I gave myself no more. I walked out through the back door into the yard. The air was cold but clean. October had truly arrived. My chest throbbed from the burn, but I walked without looking back, through the backyard, along the fence to my neighbor's house. Robert has lived here for 15 years. The retired history teacher and I often chatted over the fence about his garden, about the Cleveland Browns, about how the youth were ruining the city. But I had never come to his door with a suitcase in hand. The light in his kitchen was on. He was sitting at the table reading the paper. I knocked. He opened it quickly, wearing a bathrobe, a look of surprise on his face. "George, what's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I replied. "I need to ask for a favor. I can't stay for long." He stepped back without a word, letting me in. It smelled like fried bacon and coffee. That's what a normal morning, the kind that should have been, smells like. I put down my suitcase and sat down, trying not to wince from the pain. "Coffee?" he asked. "Only if it's not boiling," I tried to joke. "I have something to tell you." But the story wasn't a funny one. Robert poured me a cup from his coffee pot, a normal, peaceful one, not one that flies into your chest. He sat across from me, listening intently, not interrupting. "It all started 4 years ago," I said, sipping the hot coffee. "When they first came to stay." "Tough times," they said. Max had lost his job. I remembered them asking for a month, and they just stayed. I nodded. My voice started to get hoarse. First it was fine. Then Max lost another job, then another. There was always someone to blame. The boss, his colleagues, anyone but him. Robert listened. His face didn't change. A history teacher's habit, I guess. And then the garage. "Remember my perfect order? Every tool in its place." I remember. I come home and everything is turned upside down. "He was just trying to be more efficient," he said. "And what did you say?" "What do you think?" I told him. "This is our garage now. We're a family." Robert grimaced. "In your house. In my house. With my tools, which I bought over 30 years. And Lena didn't even seem surprised. She said he was just trying to help." I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, my house. Inside, them. Walking around my kitchen as if it were their own. And me, with a suitcase, at my neighbor's. Then it got worse. Max started taking my car, eating my food. He invited his friends over to play poker until late at night, and Lena just kept defending him. "I'm a harsh man," she'd say. "Too demanding." Robert poured us more coffee. "And why didn't you kick them out?" "My daughter." I kept thinking, we'll get through this, we'll manage. Maybe grandchildren would come along. Max would get a job. Life would get back to normal. "Uh-huh," Robert said. Then came the business. A food truck. A profitable venture, he said. I gave him $20,000, all my savings. 3 weeks later, he sold it to pay off a debt. Said the business didn't work out. "Saved you from a bigger loss," he said. Robert took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "He stole $1 million and called it a rescue, and Lena said he did the right thing." I clenched my fists, remembering that helpless rage, that silent insult. And this morning, my voice got quieter. They came with an envelope. Debts, $450,000, all in my name. My signatures, as if I'd been gambling it all away. And when I refused, Lena, she threw hot coffee on me. Robert paled. "Show me." I unbuttoned the top buttons of my shirt. The red patches stretched across my chest. He stood up, not believing his eyes. "She did this?" And then Max told me to get out, that the house was theirs now. He threatened me, said he'd drive me out. "George," Robert said, his voice now serious. "This is a crime. We're calling the police." I hesitated, still thinking, she's my daughter. "Stop," Robert said firmly. This isn't your daughter anymore. This is a criminal. Forgery of signatures, fraud, assault. We're calling them right now, before they destroy the evidence." I hesitated, wanting to believe it was all a mistake, that it would all resolve itself. "Call," he said, his voice firm. I finally picked up the phone. My hands were shaking, but I dialed 911. The dispatcher asked what was wrong. "Domestic violence," I said. "They scalded me with boiling water. They're trying to kick me out of my own home. They forged documents for debts." "Where are you now?" I gave her Robert's address. "Who attacked you?" "Elena Yurievna Fedorova and her husband, Maxim Igorovich Fedorov. They live with me." "The police are on their way. Stay where you are. Do you need medical assistance?" "I'll manage. Assess the situation on site." I answered all her questions. About weapons, about my past, about the possibility of them fleeing. I answered each one honestly, calmly, and when I hung up, I felt like a stone had been lifted from my soul. "Now what?" Robert asked. "Like I crossed a bridge," I said, "and there's no going back. But it's the right thing." I nodded. Through the window, I saw a car with a flashing light pull up to my house. "It's time," Robert said, standing up. "Let's go get some justice." The police car pulled up to Robert's house silently. Another car was behind it. 2 officers got out of the first one, an older woman with graying dark hair and a young, tall man in uniform. Their faces were serious, their gazes attentive and sharp. You could tell they had experience. "George Peterson?" the woman asked, extending her hand. "Senior Lieutenant Miller. This is Lieutenant Davis. We got a call about domestic violence." I nodded and shook her hand. Miller immediately noticed the burn, visible from under my unbuttoned collar. "Please show me the burn," she said. I slowly unbuttoned my shirt and opened my chest. Davis immediately got his camera and took several pictures from different angles. "Tell us what happened, from the very beginning," Miller said, opening a notepad. I told them everything, calmly, without hysterics. About the documents, the threats, the coffee, how they threw me out of my own house. The words came out clearly. Now it wasn't emotions, it was facts. "Are the documents with you?" Davis asked. "No, they're on the kitchen table. I left without them." Miller and Davis exchanged glances. "We need to inspect the house and seize the evidence. Will you come with us?" "Of course." We walked across the yard. Me, Robert, and the 2 police officers walked in silence. My own house now seemed alien, as if it had been infected. I looked at the windows and wondered how much more filth was in there. Davis knocked on the door, hard. "Police, open up!" First, silence. Then we heard footsteps. The door creaked open. Lena appeared. She saw the uniform and turned pale. Behind her stood Max. His face changed right before my eyes, from confusion to anger. Then, a mask of indifference. "Lena Fedorova." Miller took a step forward. "We need to talk to you about an incident that happened this morning." "I don't understand." Lena's voice trembled. "A complaint was filed for domestic violence and threats. We need to come inside," Miller said. Davis pushed Max aside and motioned for them to go into the living room. It was all clear, coordinated. It was obvious they weren't seeing scenes like this for the first time. I stayed in the yard with Robert. Muffled voices came from inside. The time dragged on. 20 minutes later, Davis came out and called us. "Come in. We need you to confirm which of these papers you saw." The documents were on the kitchen table. The traces of coffee had also been documented. I went inside. It felt cold and empty inside. Everything seemed as it was before, but my smell, My peace was gone. Only a strange, intrusive presence remained. The papers were lying on the table. I confirmed, "Yes, these are them. Yes, these are the amounts, the signatures. These are all as they were this morning." "That's enough," Davis said. "We've recorded everything." Miller came over to me. "Based on the evidence provided and the evidence, we have grounds for detention." A minute later, I saw Davis talking on his radio, calling for transport. Then they were reading Lena her rights. "Elena Fedorova, you are under arrest on suspicion of deliberately causing harm to health and attempted fraud." "It was an accident," she screamed. "I didn't mean to. It was an emotional outburst." Max was cuffed almost simultaneously. He resisted, cursed. "The old geezer made it all up himself. This is all a lie." They pushed him into the car. Lena was crying. Her mascara was running. Her voice was breaking. "Dad, please, this is a mistake. Dad!" I didn't answer. I just watched the doors of the squad car close. Miller came back and handed me a receipt for the case being initiated and the contact information of the investigator. "You'll need to come to the station tomorrow, file an official statement, give a full testimony, and bring the documents for the house." "I will." When the cars drove away, I was left in the yard with Robert. We stood in silence. It wasn't joyful, not sad, just empty, as if the loud, alien music in the house had finally been turned off, and there was silence. "Let's go home," Robert said. "To your real home." 3 weeks later, Robert came to my kitchen again, this time with an envelope. "I think you should see this," he said, sitting down in his usual chair. The envelope was unofficial, without stamps. Inside were copies of documents, court summonses, notices, statements. All for Max. He was a bankrupt. More accurately, he was trying to become one. "Where did you get this?" I asked, looking through the papers. It was all official, through court websites and public records. "You should have checked to make sure you were safe." I nodded. Bankruptcy, seizure of property, lawsuits, taxes. One document particularly pleased me. He was fired from his job after they found out about his criminal record, without the right to be reinstated. A standard procedure when it comes to violence. "Where is he now?" "A men's shelter on Gorky Street. He lives at the state's expense. His creditors are already looking for him. The threats have started, and they're serious." He showed me a printout of a conversation. There were messages from people with nicknames like T-Bone Tony and Misha the Ice Pick. I read it and felt the anxiety leave me. It was as if someone else was finally getting what they deserved. "And Lena?" Robert looked sadder. "A different story. She has a 2-year suspended sentence, a restraining order against you, a fine mandatory anger management classes. She violated the restraining order twice. She came by when you weren't here. The neighbors called the police. The first time she said she forgot her documents. The second time she just sat on the porch and cried. And her job? She was fired the same day the newspaper ran a photo of her arrest. She was a client service manager. No one needs that kind of reputation. Where does she live? In a women's shelter. She moved out of her apartment. The landlord wouldn't extend the lease. I was silent. "She wrote to you," Robert said, and handed me the envelope. "They brought it to me. Apparently she already knows you don't read her letters. 3 pages, neat handwriting." I started reading, then stopped. It was all clear from the first lines. "Forgive me. Give me a chance." I didn't know. I didn't understand. I folded the letter. "What are you going to do?" Robert asked. I looked out the window. Outside the window, passers-by were walking, Autumn leaves were falling. An ordinary life. Without blackmail, without threats. Nothing, I said. She made her choice 4 years ago when she chose him. Robert sighed. According to reports, she's going to her classes, not skipping. She's trying. Maybe she's a good girl. It will be useful for her next family. You've really moved on, haven't you? I stood up, walked over to the coffee maker, and poured myself a cup. Now it was just coffee, not a weapon. She doused me with boiling water to protect a man who had conned me out of thousands. You don't rebuild bridges with people like that. You burn them. The house was slowly becoming mine again. Without Lena and Max, it seemed to breathe, to straighten its walls, tired of the endless fuss. I rearranged the furniture to my liking, threw out half of their things, washed the kitchen of the traces of coffee. Even that strange, cloying smell was gone. The windows were shining, the floors were creaking in a familiar way. For the first time in 4 years, there was no one here who walked through it like a rental. A call came unexpectedly. The number was unfamiliar. I picked up, ready to hang up immediately. George, it's Margaret, and your style and your way with words. Ready to get back in the game? I smiled for the first time in a long time. More than ever. There are 3 new restaurants in Boston. Readers are asking, Vietnamese cuisine, farm-to-table service, and some kind of deconstructed comfort. We have no idea what it is, but it sounds trendy. Send me the details, I said. I'll check it out. I opened my laptop, an old but reliable one. It held everything that only I and my editors knew about me. No one in my family even suspected. To everyone else, I was a retired mechanic on a pension, always short of money. In reality, for 30 years, I had been writing under a pseudonym for culinary magazines. They paid well. You could live comfortably if you didn't brag about it too much. My late wife thought it was self-indulgence. She wanted me to work with my hands, like a man. After her death, I just didn't share. And then I realized, the less people know, the better you sleep. The files were in place. Reviews of places in Chelyabinsk, Samara, Kazan. Photos, notes, checks, all neatly in subfolders. I scrolled until I found an unfinished article about a dumpling shop in Perm. I felt like finishing it right then and there, but I decided later. First, I had to get my life back. I walked through the house. The garage was in order. The tools were lying where they should, on their own shelves. I took down the polishing machine from the shelf. Even the smell was familiar, oily, like from those years when I worked in a workshop. The bedroom had a new bed, neutral, without the colorful quilt that Lena had brought in an attempt to modernize the interior. Everything was mine. Everything was to my taste. Their former room was empty. I repainted the walls, changed the curtains, ordered simple furniture, put in a writing desk, moved the computer. Now it was my office, not their temporary shelter. In a drawer behind a false panel were all my IDs, letters from editors, checks, copies of the issues with my articles. Everything that proved I wasn't just a mechanic, that I was someone else, that I had a life, and it didn't end with what they tried to take from me. The back door slammed shut. Robert came in, carrying a bottle of wine and a folder of documents. By his face, I could tell there was news. The trial happened, he said, while I set out glasses. Max got 8 months. Lena, 2 years of probation plus compensation for damages. How much? 15,000. Monthly payments for the next 5 years. I poured the wine, leaned back in my chair, and listened to the sound of the liquid filling the glass. Before, this sound was the beginning of family holidays. Now it was a symbol of freedom. Turns out, the one who tried to take my home away from me will now be paying me. Exactly, Robert said. The judge, by the way, was a woman. A real tough cookie. She didn't even let Lena get a word in at the end of the session. I have nowhere to go, she said, and the judge replied, You chose this yourself. I nodded. Fair enough. We drank. And what about the threats from the creditors? Robert flipped through a couple of pages. Max owes almost $20 million officially. 10 of that is to online casinos, the rest to private microloans. They're threatening him, yes, but now he's in a work release colony. It'll be harder for them to get to him. Is Lena still in the shelter? Yes. No job. She tried to get one. Everywhere she's refused. The photo from the arrest is all over the internet. The terms of her probation are restrictive. She can't come near you. She's already violated it twice. They caught her. I stood up and went to the trash can in the veranda. There lay a bouquet of chamomiles and small flowers, the kind she used to pick in the yard as a child. I had found it on my doorstep this morning. She had come again. Robert sighed. She won't leave you alone. I know. I took the flowers, threw them in the trash, and slowly closed the lid. If she shows up again, let your lawyer send a second warning. I've already written it without emotions, according to the law. And a second one, and a third. For every occasion. The house was quiet, very quiet. And for the first time, I felt that this wasn't loneliness. It was peace. Clean, like the autumn sky outside the window. I went to make tea, brewed some chamomile. I used to be afraid of hot drinks after that coffee. Not anymore. Because I knew no one was standing behind me with boiling water in their hands. A call, an SMS, the number was from the editorial office. Margaret had confirmed the restaurant in Boston, sent the tickets. You're flying on Monday. We're waiting for your review next week. Good luck, George. I smiled. Boston, a restaurant, work. Life goes on. Monday. Boston met me with rain and a gray sky, just as it should have. I stepped out of the taxi, right into that familiar northern gloom, pulled up my hood, and felt, yes, I'm back in business. The restaurant was in a side street near the waterfront, unassuming on the outside, but inside everything sparkled. Wood, glass, muted light. The waiters were in uniform. The music was quiet. It smelled of lavender and lemon. I showed my reservation and sat by the window. The menu was brought by a girl of about 20, polite but without any fawning. I placed my order, duck breast with a blackberry glaze, a salad with roasted parsnips, and for dessert, a deconstructed apple cobbler. I ate attentively. I watched as the waiters moved precisely, but soullessly. The dishes were beautiful, but cold. The products were fresh, but something in them didn't come together. There was no feeling that someone had actually cooked, as if they had assembled parts and served a set. I pulled out a notebook. Not a laptop, but a notebook. I always started with it. Writing by hand is more honest. The presentation is perfect. The taste is non-existent, like a Mercedes-Benz with a cheap plastic interior. Further down the list, service, lighting, atmosphere, prices. I noted everything honestly, as always. This was my strength. For 30 years, I never played up to anyone. That's why my texts were bought. When I was done, I left. Outside, it smelled of the wet pavement. I bought a coffee to go. Hot, ordinary, without threats, and walked to the hotel. The wind tore at the drops on my collar, but I felt like I was returning, not just to the profession, but to myself. That evening, I sent the draft to the editorial office. Margaret called back within an hour, having read it in one breath. "You're in fine form. Can you take on a second restaurant?" "I can," I said. "But in the evening, I have other plans." She paused for a second. "Personal ones?" "Restorative," I smirked. The whole day I walked around the city. No particular itinerary. I just walked, looking at people, at the courtyards, at the signs, listening to the noise. I once dreamed of moving here. Then I got married, Lena was born, work, life, and now I came here as a free man. Not a fugitive, not a father of a family, not a victim. I just went into an old bakery that I remembered from previous visits. I took a cheese Danish, sat by the window. People outside the glass were hurrying. I wasn't. I drank my tea and listened to the clock ticking. And that was true happiness. On the third day, I went to the 11th restaurant, the very one with the farm-to-table concept. Everything was different there. Simple dishes, but cooked with respect. The staff was attentive, the kitchen was open, the cooks were real. I ate hearty beef stew and read a menu that didn't have a single pretentious name. Just cucumbers with honey, creamy grits with roasted butternut squash. And I understood. That's it. That's what the reader is looking for. And that's what I should write about. I wrote it down. They don't feed you here. They welcome you. The difference is palpable. It's like coming home, where they don't ask you what you want. They just put a plate in front of you and say, "Eat. You're tired." When I left, I felt at peace. I knew that I wouldn't have to make anything up with this text. It would write itself, as if life itself were dictating it. In the evening, I received a message from Robert. The investigator called. The judge extended Lena's restraining order. She violated it again. "She was at your house yesterday. A neighbor called the police. Everything is documented." I didn't reply, just put the phone on silent. I had a different evening, without their shadows. I went out onto the embankment, stood by the water, looked at the drawbridge. I pulled out my notebook and started writing not a review, but a letter to myself. I didn't know why, but I needed to. You lived honestly. You worked, fed, forgave, and you were betrayed, and you survived. So you can do anything. I closed the notebook and went back to my hotel room. The plane was in the morning. Home was waiting for me, but now it was truly my home. Returning home wasn't like it used to be. Not like coming back from a trip. Not like after a business trip. It was like a final return to myself. The house greeted me with silence. I opened the door, felt the familiar creak of the floorboards, and realized that now this sound didn't irritate me. Now it was like the voice of an old friend. I walked through the rooms. Everything stood where I had decided. Nothing moved, nothing opened, nothing touched. The feeling that the house had finally stopped defending itself and had started living with me again. On the kitchen table lay a letter. Inside, a receipt. A bank transfer. The first payment from Lena. $15,000, exactly as the court had ordered. Sender, Fedorova EY. Purpose, compensation for damages resulting from a domestic conflict. That's all. Legally just a payer. Emotionally, no one anymore. I put the transfer in a folder where I kept documents, without regret, without a tremor in my fingers. A little later, Robert came out. He came in more often than before, as if on business. But I understood. He was just checking to make sure I wasn't alone. Not because he was afraid for me, but because he respected me. "Did she bring it?" he asked. "Yep, pennies." "Well, it's a start," he said. "You know what's strange?" I poured us some tea. When I held it in my hands, I felt nothing. And that's right. This isn't about money. It's about a boundary. There it is, drawn. Now she pays for crossing the line. I nodded. We drank our tea. Quietly. It was overcast outside, but warm. Autumn, a real one, without fakery. The next day, I went to the DMV. Lena and Max's registration was officially removed. In the entry, there was only me now. The house was once again legally registered to a single owner. Then to the bank, I updated my access to the online account, set up two-factor authentication, reissued my cards. Every little thing, like a brick in a wall, protecting my life from the past. The phone rang in the evening. The number was unfamiliar. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, another one, then a voicemail. I didn't listen, just deleted it. The next morning, a new letter, an envelope in the mailbox. I recognized the handwriting. I opened it. 3 pages, all in the same vein. Dad, I have nowhere else to go. I've realized everything. Forgive me. I beg you, just talk to me. I read it to the end. Then I went to the kitchen, turned on the gas, and burned the letter. Let the smoke from these words be the last thing I need from her. The middle of the week passed in silence. I wrote a review of Boston, edited old articles. Margaret called, offered a business trip to Charleston to review a gastropub on the coast. I agreed. Inside, there was a growing feeling that life wasn't just back. It was better, cleaner, stronger, without debts, without constant tension, without that sticky feeling that you have to save those who have no intention of changing. On Friday evening, I was sitting by the window with some tea when the doorbell rang. A long, single ring. I went to the peephole. No one. I opened it. On the doormat, a bouquet, the same as before. Chamomiles and cornflowers. A note. I still love you. Please. I took the bouquet. I stood there for a minute, then opened the trash can and dropped the flowers in. Quietly, without pathos. Some things can't be glued back together. Not because you're evil, but because you're alive and you want to keep living, not get stuck in the same pit. I went back into the house, closed the door, checked the lock. The alarm was on. I sat down, finished my article, corrected a paragraph, hit send, then poured myself some chamomile tea, like a symbol, and drank it. For peace. Charleston met me with warmth and humid air. October here is completely different, not like in Cleveland, where the wind cuts to the bone and leaves are swept along the asphalt. Here the sea smells of salt, the air of tangerine and damp clay, and the sun is such that it seems to be trying to convince you that winter is a myth. I drove from the airport in silence, looking out the window. Hills, paths, signs with grapes and khachapuri flashed by. And only at some point did I realize I was smiling. The hotel was a small one on the coast. The room was simple, without pathos, but cozy. From the balcony, a view of the sea, I put down my bag, took off my jacket, went out onto the balcony, leaned on the railing. Below me was a half-empty beach, the waves quietly lapping at the pebbles. And at that moment, I felt like I was truly breathing. Not just living, not just recovering, but breathing. Like a man who no longer has anyone behind him with a knife. Like a man from whom they took everything and couldn't take the most important thing. The first restaurant was near the embankment, deep in a side street. It was simply called The Homestead, without pretense, without hipsterism. Wooden tables, checkered curtains, the smell of baked beans and stewed pears, a waiter in a linen shirt. The menu was on thick paper without gloss. I ordered carcho, fried barabulka, and a tarkun lemonade. Everything was served silently, but with such care, as if I were not a guest, but a relative who had been long awaited. I wrote right away, sitting at the table. They don't feed with food here. They feed with trust. This is a rare feeling when a spoonful of soup heals not the stomach, but a tired heart. Then back to the hotel. In the evening, tea on the balcony, the sound of the surf, a lamp, a notebook. No letters, no calls, no obligations. 2 days later, a report from Robert arrived. A full breakdown of Lena's and Max's affairs. I read it sitting on the balcony with a cup of coffee. Max was transferred to a settlement colony, works at a construction site at the institution, complains of back pain, but makes no official complaints. The threat from T-Bone Tony and Misha the Ice Pick is still in effect, but they haven't reached him yet. Lena's situation is worse. After the 4th violation of the restraining order, the court ordered mandatory psychological evaluation. The report: unstable behavior, bursts of aggression, a tendency to manipulate, no job. Attempts to find one failed. Volunteers at the shelter complain about her tantrums. The neighbors filed a complaint with the management company, asking to limit her presence on the territory. Robert attached clippings from the press, small notes in the City Chronicle, comments from readers. The woman who doused her father with boiling water is now asking for public housing. Let her give back what she stole. I finished reading, closed the laptop, placed it next to me, and felt not gloating, no, just silence inside. On the 5th day, I went to the market, bought pears, local honey, cheese. The vendor recognized me from my review, it seems, and nodded respectfully. Did you write about the homestead? Yes. Well said. Exactly as it is. I try, I replied. I sat on a bench in the park, ate a pear, and watched the locals, who with children, who with a cart, who just came out to stand by the sea. And I suddenly remembered how, as a young man, I dreamed of such a simple old age, not as a battle, but as peace, not as a flight, but as freedom. And here it came. That evening, a dinner was scheduled at the last restaurant. The name was strange, The Taste of Time. I went in and sat by the window. The interior was trendy but not pretentious. Wooden walls, photos of old recipes. At the entrance, a shelf with books about Russian cuisine. They served a salad of baked pumpkin with pickled onions, then pike perch with a sauce of baked pepper and a cream of horseradish. For dessert, a jelly with white chocolate and mint. And in every dish, there was no fantasy. It was memory. I wrote not as a critic, but as a person. Some tastes are letters from a grandmother, some are conversations with a father at the kitchen table, and some are a way to prove to yourself that you are still capable of feeling. The next morning, I was flying out. Before leaving, I went to the beach, sat on a rock, was silent for a long time, then stood up, breathed in, ran my hand over my shoulder, as if brushing off the remnants of something heavy. Goodbye, Charleston. Thank you for bringing me back to me. The house in Cleveland met me again with dry air and a light frost on the porch. Charleston remained in the past, like a memory that freedom can smell of tangerine and sea salt. I took off my jacket, put my bag in the hallway, got undressed. The house was cool, but clean. Familiar. Right. I went into the kitchen, turned on the kettle, put a cup, got honey from the cupboard, opened the window, letting in a bit of the street. Neighbors walked by, nodded. One raised his hand. Welcome back, George. Thanks. As I see it, I poured the boiling water, sat down at the table. The house was silent, but it was a calm, kind silence. The kind you don't want to fill with voices. The next day, Robert came again, brought the fresh press, some papers, sat down without taking off his coat. Well, the court documents have arrived. The compensation has been officially registered. 2 payments have already gone to your account. She pays like clockwork. Without letters? No. But there is one thing. Robert pulled out an envelope. She sent it to my address, asked me to pass it on. I didn't take it right away. Then I still reached for it. The last one, I think, yes. If you're not going to read it, I'll understand. No, I said. I'll read it, to put a final stop to it. I opened the envelope. The paper was plain, the handwriting familiar to the point of pain. Dad, if you're reading this, it means you've given yourself the trouble to read it. That's already more than I deserve. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know there are things that can't be forgiven. I'm writing because I can't not say it anymore. I was wrong. I lost. I tried to justify myself before the court, before the police, before myself. But it doesn't change the essence. I betrayed. I don't want to justify myself. Let it just be. I chose fear. I chose a man who spoke beautifully but destroyed everything around him. I allowed him to use me, you, everyone. I thought that deception for the sake of survival is not a crime. And then it went further. Signatures, documents, and then coffee. When I threw it at you, I was no longer your daughter. You were a resource for me, a piece of paper, and that's terrible to admit. You survived. You found the strength not just to withstand, but to grow above it all. And I'm in a shelter. I write to you from a bench by the window, where at night you can hear someone crying. I am among those who have built nothing. You write about food. I know. I found your articles. Now I understand where you got your light. I'm not asking for a meeting. I'm not asking to come back. I'm just asking you to live without me. Honestly, freely, because now I know for sure you deserve it. Lena. I finished reading and was silent. Well? Robert asked quietly. Well written, I said. Too well to be untrue, but still too late. I folded the letter, not tearing it, just folded it and put it in a desk drawer. Not as a memory, but to know it all happened. And it all passed. In the evening, I went out into the yard, installed a new bench by the garage, the very one I had dreamed of even before this whole story. A simple wooden frame, a wide board. It's comfortable to sit on, nice to look at the flower bed. I sat down, got a cup, poured some freshly brewed tea. On the small table next to me was a newspaper, the very one where I used to read the sports section, and now they had published my reviews under a pseudonym. I was no longer hiding, not because I wanted fame, just because I was no longer afraid to be myself. A week later, a letter came from the editorial office. George, the readers have asked us to personally thank you. The review of Charleston, the best of the year. Are you ready to join our permanent staff? The terms are the same. Complete freedom. We hope you'll be with us for a long time. I smiled. Freedom. And so now I sit in my own kitchen, writing these lines. Not for someone, not for the court, not for the police, not for an editor, but for myself. I am not perfect. I forgave when I shouldn't have. I endured when I should have left. I hoped when everything was already lost, but I chose not to take revenge, but to survive. And in that is everything you need to know. Lena, if you ever read this, know that I hold no grudges, but I'm not waiting for your call. Each of us now has our own road. I have a simple morning, tea, a notebook, trips, a quiet life where there are no debts, neither financial nor spiritual. And most importantly, now I know for sure, my house belongs to me again. If you liked this story, Give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the window to the left. Thanks for watching.